All right, everyone. We're back tonight for episode 36 of Stub Luv Live. And tonight we have, I see him already on, Will Stern. Let me get Will on. Got people pouring in. All right, there he is. What's up, Will?
How's it going?
Man, I'm doing real well. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
So for everyone who's watching, and I see we got all kinds of people coming in. I saw Justin Sutterfield. I saw Papa Jim. I saw Wheeler's Collectibles. I see him coming in. Will is one of the lead journalists for Collect Media. And I have to tell you, everyone knows that I'm a big Darren Rovell fan. I love Darren. He's a good guy. He's a good man. He has something that my people call spilkes. He can't sit still, but that's okay. You know, we kind of give him a pass for that. But Darren has a really good group of people around him that have started this Collect Media. And Will is one of the lead journalists. So, Will, tell us a little bit about Collect and what your role is.
Yeah, absolutely. So Collect we started in April, and it's bringing together Darren, obviously, is the founder, Kevin Jackson, who was the founding editor of Page 2 at ESPN. He's got this amazing pedigree in sports journalism, and Ben Burrows for Sports Card Investor, and Matt Liberman of ESPN, myself, and it's taking a journalistic approach to covering this industry, which there's so many great storytellers in this industry, and there's been a lot of great work done, but this type of real kind of journalistic rigor applied to the space is something that we felt was lacking, and it's been, I don't know how many months, started in April, and so far, we've been able to really, I think, make a difference, and we're gonna keep pushing.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, you have made a difference. I think we all appreciate it as collectors to be able to go on and see the stories. And I have to tell you, Will, what you're producing in the way of content is terrific.
Appreciate
Not
that.
just not just Collect, but I really like your stuff in particular. So give us a little bit of background about Will Stern. I wrote down some notes. You went to school for journalism. You graduated in 2000 and was it 2020?
Yeah.
So you're only 25. You're a youngin, and
Yeah. Well,
and then COVID hits, and give us the rest.
yeah. So my whole thought since I was like 11 was want to be a writer, and then it's like, okay, what do? You try to be a journalist because that's the path, right? To tell you, call it your high school guidance counselor's like, well, that's what you do. So I was gonna go down that path and graduate in 2020, and my job offers were revoked because if anyone happens to recall what happened in that year, there was a bit of a pandemic. Um, and I decided that, you know what, after all, I wasn't sure that I even wanted to be a reporter, and I was more interested in startups. So I actually ended up working at Rally, um, and that was really my introduction to collectibles. Just like everyone else, I can look back and say, oh, it turns out I really was collecting my whole life. I had baseball cards, I had this and that. But I was not even, I mean, I didn't follow any of it. I was totally just unaware and had never taken an interest. And then 3.5 years at Rally, I'm learning about every collectible category under the sun for my job. And that became something that I obviously learned so much, but I also developed the disease of collecting.
Of course you did. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you told me in advance that being at Rally, and I guess, does everyone know, is Rally one of those fractional companies?
Yeah, Rally was kind of the first to do it. It started with cars and then expanded to like truly everything from whiskey to rare Star Wars toys and like, yeah.
So you're going to work every day. You don't really know too much about collectibles, and then you kind of learn on the job. Um, and you're touching T206 Honus Wagner cards and the rarest of rare collectibles on the planet.
Yeah, so I mean that's intoxicating, right? Like it, and that also gave me a really weird kind of um, like most people aren't following auctions for things that they cannot afford, but because I was dealing in that stuff, that was what intrigued me. So I'm watching the auctions of all these insane, amazing collectibles with the greatest stories that are closing at $5 million or whatever, with not a thought in my mind that I was going to, take out some sketchy loan or something to afford it. Like,
I am, yeah.
but so I always was kind of just enamored by the high end stuff, in addition to my own collecting, which is at the very low end. So that kind of created a weird dichotomy where I have this fascination with the legendary stuff, and I follow it like I follow sports, um, as well as developing my own collecting habits, which are not at the $1 million level.
That's okay. That's okay. So how do you meet Darren? Darren, is that some association through Rally?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you the first time we crossed paths. I'm sure it was like a DM at some point, but we just became friends, and then at a certain point, at some point we talked about how something like Collect should exist. I don't know when that really was, and then at one point he calls me. He says, "I'm doing this. You in?" And I said, "Yeah."
That's really, really cool. That's really cool. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we love about Collect. And someone's writing that we're getting a little bit, and I can hear it, a little bit of feedback on your end. I'm not so sure why.
That's probably because I have it here. This is
Yep.
probably
Okay. Yeah. A
better.
little bit better. Yeah. I only kind of hear it when I'm talking, but maybe a little bit better. So I think what ticket collectors love about Collect is that you guys do a lot of stories on tickets. For such a niche market, there's definitely an affinity, we know from Darren and also from you, because we follow your account as well, the Will's Collection account on Instagram. And, you've got tickets and various pieces of memorabilia on there. But you guys are doing a lot of stories on a multitude of things. I mean, your story today on Tiger Woods and Upper Deck, I mean, it was really cool. But you guys did one not too long ago, and I guess it's kind of relevant because it's September the 12th. September 11th was yesterday, and it
Um,
was, the ticket, the last tickets that were ever printed to go to, the Twin Towers on 9/10. What do you think well, first of all, is something like that, should that be collected, or is there some kind of moribund, I don't know, association to it that makes it that it should not even be a collectible?
you know, I think that this is a discussion across all categories of collectibles that is one of my, I don't want to say favorites, but one that I am so intrigued by and I think is endlessly fascinating. And I don't think that there's ever been a point where I've come down hard on one side of like a controversial piece like this. When it comes to that ticket specifically, so that piece that you just held up, that was a column that I wrote. It wasn't like a news story. It was kind of like my take.
Yeah.
And I kind of talked about the various contexts in which it obviously is a piece of history. And, you know, I grew up on Long Island, 20 miles away from World Trade Center. So, my town, it was always a topic growing up, right? So, and so many of the stories that you hear are the narrow misses, right? And this, to me, immediately screamed this, an example of a story somewhat like that. And that was something that made me feel like, hey, there's a real rationale there to call it a work, a piece of history that is collectible and not necessarily offensive. What I did have an issue with was the fact that it was flipped within months.
Yeah.
So that just that piece of information alone, I'm like, well, the previous owner wasn't doing it for, the most noble of
Yep.
reasons. And it's not as if you can't flip things, but if you're going to argue that a piece like that is so important and it's part of history and you're going to preserve it, it definitely led me down the path to lean on the opinion that maybe that one in particular wasn't my favorite.
I mean, I think those tickets are selling for almost $10,000 right now. And I mean, they are pieces of history, Will, but at the same time, it carries with it, some real horrific memories for some people in this country. So it's definitely a balancing act. I personally, Will, I'm kind of like you. I see it as history. I see it as something that we should preserve. And like you said, maybe they belong in museums. I'm not really so sure, but I think they're cool. I think it's historic.
Yeah, it's all about the context, but at the end of the day, it's hard to argue against the fact that that is endlessly fascinating.
It,
It is intriguing. So it doesn't matter either side. It is intriguing.
and and here we go. Like here's the scope of what you are doing at Collect and the stories that you're writing and publishing, and it's just great stuff. So this next one is new video from JFK assassination surfaces will be auctioned. So
Yeah.
so where is this going to be auctioned, and what's the
Yeah.
lowdown on this?
So it's at RR auctions. I believe it's early October it'll sell. And yeah, I mean, that is, I can't say that is something that I ever thought we'd be covering.
Yeah.
But, when I was speaking to the guys at RR and they explained it to me, I was like, holy moly. So, I mean, it's a previously unseen footage of kind of the motorcade after the assassination, and much of the footage was confiscated, I guess, by the Warren Report directly afterwards. So this person had kept it in his family. I believe he revealed he owned it only 50 years afterwards. So they're selling it off, and they're only providing stills in the auction listing. So it's like to watch it, you got to buy
it. Six figures, they're saying, is the estimate. Upward of $100,000 as the estimate. So pretty cool stuff. And then another story that Darren wrote on Collect, again, kind of along the same line, was the fact that this menu to the Titanic sold for, what was it, $340,000?
Yeah, so that was one of the many insane items that were sold this week by Christie's as part of the first tranche of pieces from the Paul Allen collection. So, Microsoft co-founder. He had previously, they had sold his art collection, which set a record, I think, for the highest grossing single owner auction in art history. Don't quote me on that, but something around that. And now it's all this kind of it's like history and tech. So they also sold an Apple I computer that was taken off the desk of Steve Jobs allegedly. It's hard to verify that, but that's the story. And that sold for $945K, a record for an Apple I. They also sold the Cray 1 computer, which is a supercomputer that I only was familiarized with after Googling what is a Cray 1 computer. But that sold for, I think, over $1 million, and that's record for any computer ever at auction.
It's funny. the ticket world, we always talk about, what would a ticket to the Titanic go for? And I think it would probably exceed that $340,000 price tag for a menu. I don't know by how much, but I think it could be a $500,000 ticket.
It's an interesting one, right? And there's so many different components, and that menu had a little bit of provenance that I off the top of my head I don't remember, but it was like there was something that Darren kind of uncovered that was even more interesting than simply the menu. So it's like, whose ticket was it, right? There's names that it could be attached to that would change everything. But yeah, that's one of those things that you look back at and it's like, wow, if that ever surfaced, holy moly.
So I kind of have a little bit of affinity for the historical stuff. That still potentially might be controversial.
What's the inscription on that?
So the inscription says, "A second plane hit the second
Oh,
tower. America is under attack." And it's signed by Andy Card, George Bush's chief of staff, when he announced to him that the first tower